Gary, I'm sure you have a lot to say there. I know you both use the word collapsing, so you agree that there's a problem here. But I think you, from studying both of your sort of perspectives, you think that the solution and the cause of the problem is different.
I mean, I put bets on. I put bets on. That's what I do. I put bets on. At the beginning of COVID, we knew the government's going to give an enormous amount of money out. Total amount of money now, UK government deficit since the beginning of COVID is £1 trillion. US number is $14 trillion. That's, £20,000 per UK adult. My background is I understand that when the distribution gets worse, when inequality gets worse, living standards fall. So when the UK government was going to give £1 trillion out, all I wanted to know was who's going to end up with that money. That's all I wanted to know. And the US number, 13 trillion, 14 trillion, is just outlandish. But I think the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my whole life was that at the beginning of COVID, the very beginning of COVID, we knew governments across the world were going to be giving out tens of trillions of pounds, dollars, euros. Nobody even thought to ask who's going to get tens of trillions richer. Nobody in the Conservatives, nobody in Labour, nobody in the Republicans, nobody in Democrats, nobody in the media, nobody in academia, nobody at the central banks. Nobody asked this. It's almost beautiful. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So I sat down and I did the analysis at the beginning. Because lockdown is essentially banning the spending of the rich and replacing that spending of the rich with printed money from government, what happens is the government gives workers money, they use that money to pay their bills, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage. It goes to the rich can't spend it because they're locked indoors. And what you get is essentially an enormous amount of money from the government to the poor, to the rich. And this massive, massive transfer of wealth. That was so obviously going to happen at the beginning of COVID. Nobody discussed it, which I think is itself amazing. Let me ask you a question, right? If we were now to pause the economy for 2 years, and during that pause, massively increase wealth inequality, what do you think would happen to broad living conditions when we unpaused?
See, one of the things that I think happened during the pandemic is everything went digital. And entrepreneurs and investors did actually think about what would happen. The investors immediately boomed stocks like Zoom and Microsoft, and we ended up with the Magnificent Seven. I don't know if there's 7 big tech companies in the USA market. And those big 7 companies have gone from 5 trillion valuation to 17 trillion valuation in the time of the pandemic. And if you think about what did the pandemic do, everyone had to work from home, so we all had to have Microsoft subscriptions. Everyone went onto websites, so we all went to AWS, Amazon. We all started buying and learning how to buy from Amazon rather than buying from our local high streets. Every business in the world figured out how to run their business remotely. We had this massive transformation. It's actually a wholesale transformation of society that we all learned how to live and work differently. I saw a boom in entrepreneurship. So what I saw as an entrepreneur accelerator, someone who runs an entrepreneur accelerator, is just there was this sudden boom in people launching businesses, setting up Shopify accounts, setting up YouTube businesses. So the money really has moved from the traditional economy, the 2019 high street economy, over to the digital economy. And what we see is that the investors know what's going on and they just invest in this Magnificent Seven company. I think 50% of the gains of the S&P 500 is tech companies. So all the money just goes flooding into the technology companies. My belief is that technology is really dividing people, that essentially if you take anyone from any background, if they work in technology, if they're in media, tech, finance, any of that stuff that operates online, they tend to actually do pretty well after the pandemic.
Can I ask you a question now?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think the average Brit, American, Australian, wherever the person out there is watching, if they quit their job and go work in tech, do you think they'll be able to get financial security relatively easily?
Depends when you define financial security. The issue with house prices...
The ability to raise a family, have a home.
Yeah. So having a home is a big issue, right? So here's what I see with houses, because houses annoy me as well. My dad bought a house for $18,000, which is about £10,000 or less than £10,000, and it's probably worth over $1 million today. So something went on, and this, by the way, is not UK specific. The socialist countries had house prices go through the roof. If you go to Norway or Sweden, their house prices grew by 600%
It's happening everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's not specific to anywhere. It's happening everywhere.
But what happened? What has definitely happened in the UK is we actually have a housing traffic jam. So in this country, in the UK, we have 9.5 million homes that have 2 or more spare bedrooms. Big family homes have 2 or more spare bedrooms. And when you look into who owns those houses, 78% of housing wealth is baby boomers. And now, anecdotally, I take my kids trick-or-treating at Halloween, and we go down a street that is big family homes, and you go knock on the doors, and it's all people over 65, right? And they're living in a big family home with empty spare bedrooms.
You think the average American over 65 is living luxuriously?
The average American over 65, so more than half of the US economy is in the hands of baby boomers, right? So they own all the houses. The houses got bought up cheap. Baby boomers still own those houses to this day. The big family homes with multiple spare bedrooms are empty. And now that creates this traffic jam where people my age...
My grandparents,
Yeah.
they all owned property. All of them. All 4 of them died with nothing. Because that wealth which they had in property was used in equity release schemes. It was used in paying through their retirement. It was used in end-of-life care. Do you think when those old people die, young people today will be rich?
There is half the economy held by baby boomers. It's either going to be passed down or passed into the aged care industry or passed into... But the issue of why we can't get homes, 2 things. Government massively inflated the value of homes through debt. So they just injected, like low interest rates that you're involved in.
Who is the debt to?
Well, the debt is to anyone who can take out a loan, because if 0% interest rates or 2% interest rates...
Do you think it's the debt to ordinary families? Do you think the ordinary families are the creditors?
When you say ordinary families, you mean bottom third?
So if your average British or American family now has £500,000 of debt,
it's anyone
who has the credit?
It's anyone who could get at that particular time, anyone who could get their hands on a loan to buy a house.
But who has the credit? Who is on the other side of the debt? So if the average British family has £500,000 in debt,
a banking license.
Does the average British family have £500,000 of credit?
Well, a lot of people have got a lot of equity in their home now.
You think the average British family is sitting on £500,000 cash?
I'd love to look at what the actual number is, but it's a couple of 100,000 worth of equity. 78.
But what about the credit on the loan? The credit on the loan. Who owns the credit on the loan?
Bear in mind, it's disproportionately older people. So 78%.
So you think the average British old person is sitting on millions of pounds of cash?
Not millions of cash, no, equity.
Well, someone is on the other side of those mortgages.
Just want to say, the difference is if you inflate the value of a house, you don't have cash, you have a house that's worth a lot of money. So 78% of home ownership wealth is in the hands of people over 65 now. It's baby boomer generation. And they got a great gift from the government, which is the government said, we're going to just give free loans away. If someone previously could have only afforded to take out a 200 grand loan with low interest rates, they can afford a 300 grand loan.
Do you think it's okay that the average British or American young person will never own any wealth?
The issue is not whether it's okay or not. The issue is what do you do about it?
Do you own wealth?
I've got wealth, yeah.
Do you own wealth?
But it depends what you call wealth.
I do.
Yeah.
So do we, 3 multimillionaires, do we think it's okay that the average Brit or American young person will never own any wealth?
To me, that's
because I don't think that's okay.
To me, that's not the debate.
But is it okay?
It's not. Well, it's not okay. No, we want widespread affluence.
Would you rather that the people who currently are multimillionaires, would you rather that all of the wealth was owned by their kids?
I think that the way you see the world as a trader is that the world is a zero-sum game, and that there's basically the pie is a fixed pie and it gets sliced up.
How fast is the pie growing now?
There's something like this.
What's UK GDP growth at the moment?
Yeah, it's not high, right?
1%. How much did your wealth grow in the last year?
Exponentially.
Okay, so if my wealth probably grew about 20% in the last year, maybe 30. Okay, if our wealth is growing 30% and the economy is growing at 1%, where's it coming from if it's not coming from our viewers?
So I'll tell you where my wealth comes from. My wealth comes from building technology companies. And the way it works is pretty weird, which is that I invent something out of my head and I go to investors and I say to the investors, here's what we're going to create. And I give them a spreadsheet. And then they say, we'll give you a couple of $100,000 to get started, which is called seed capital. But that on paper makes me worth a couple of million, right?
Nice.
But there's nothing has been taken from anyone at this point. The investors have said, okay, we'll invest some money. Then as the business succeeds, some more investors come along and they say, we'll give you a little bit more money to keep growing it. And I'm innovating something new. And let's say investors come in and give me £1 million and for 10% of the company, and the rest of the company is worth £9 million or $9 million, right? So I'm not stealing something from the existing economy. I'm bringing something from outside of the economy into the economy, and my quote unquote net worth is growing exponentially because investors say, we'll give you a little bit of money that values the rest of the pie at a lot of money. But
So everyone's getting richer.
In the wealth there's wealth extraction, which is what traders do. They extract from the existing economy, and they bet on the economy. And then there's wealth creation, which what entrepreneurs do. They come up with new ideas, better ways of doing things, and they build wealth.
So do you think the reason our viewers, the average Brit or American, are getting poorer is because they don't know how to create wealth?
No, the reason people are getting poorer is because economic freedoms are being eroded.
Okay.
When we have high economic freedom...
And you associate that with taxes?
Well, anything that it could be anything that impacts economic freedom. So taxes and regulations are big.
Was economic freedom higher in the 50s?
50s was okay. So 50s was a interesting time. We were in food rations in this country till 1956. So we had 10 years of food rations after the war. We had a labour shortage because only really men worked. Women hadn't entered the workforce in mass. There had been 300,000 or 400,000 men killed in war. So we actually had this big labour shortage. The whole country needed to rebuild because of the Blitz had bombed it. So we had this huge need for economic activity and not enough people to do it. We only had 2% unemployment. People who had had their legs blown off were put to work at that particular time. So we had this boom, this post-war boom, and we also had the post-war baby boom, which drove consumption. And then when we got to the 60s, we had the roaring 60s or the swinging 60s, right? Pretty amazing time in Britain. And along comes high taxes. And they put up the taxes massively at the end of the 60s, and it pretty much crashed the economy. One of the things that happened...
So what were the tax rates in the 50s?
Well, they went up as high as 80 to 90% for the top,
in the 50s?
For the top earners. I think it was in the 60s.
You sure about that?
Like, I think the 50s are unique.
What is the answer, Gary?
What is the
I feel like you know.
They went up after the war.
They went up after the war.
Well, in the US, actually, tax rates got before the war.
But also the size of government as a percentage of GDP was like 30%. It was a tiny, like we are now 45% of the UK economy is government spending. We have got a massive
And who funds that spending?
Debt. The Bank of England allows them to print endless amounts of debt, which
Just debt?
deflates.
No taxes?
Gary, I want to get your opinion here because you're asking a lot of questions, but I actually don't know your opinion.
I just want to know what Daniel thinks. And I want our viewers to be able to research Daniel's opinions.
But how do you disagree with those opinions?
Listen, Daniel's a businessman. He's obviously a very successful businessman. You know, I've not been anywhere. I'm not a businessman. I'm not going to pretend to be a businessman. I'm an economist. I make money by being right in the economy. Daniel's a good businessman, and I'm right on the economy. You know, it's as simple as that, basically. You know, I'm not a good businessman, but I've got 15 years of being right on this, on the economy. And look, I know you're probably a wealthy man. You probably don't want to pay high taxes. You probably don't want your kids to pay high taxes. But we exist in an economy where wealth is being extracted out of the middle class, out of the working class, very, very rapidly. It's benefiting people like the three of us at this table. It will benefit our kids. You know, our kids will be rich, their kids will be poor. And I just think we should be honest with them. Capitalism's finished. We won. Well done, Stephen. Well done, Daniel. Well done, Gary. It's over now. Our kids will be rich, their kids will be poor. They'll pay the taxes. We won't pay the taxes. We'll avoid it. I'll make money betting on it year after year. Why are we lying to them? Why are we lying to them?
Yeah, I think that's an overly simplified view of things.
It's an overly simplified view of things that has made me a multimillionaire.
Yeah, well, look, entrepreneurs take bets on the economy as well. We take bets differently. When we start a company, we're betting on how the economy
Do you think the average
would be.
British and American worker at the 50th percentile, do you think their kids will be richer than they are?
It depends if we have economic freedom or not, right? We're going to have a split test on this.
Do you think we will?
Right. We're going to have a split test. We're going to have, the UK seems like we're going to have more taxes, more regulations. And it seems like the US is going to have less taxes and less regulations. Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that places like Singapore that have small governments have got widespread affluence. There's not a lot of poverty in Singapore.
Yeah, except for the cleaners living in the closets, yeah.
You know, look...
But we don't count them in the statistics, just like we don't count our viewers.
That's not widespread in Singapore.
Well, there's a lot of people. I've seen them in the closets. I've seen them in the closets.
There are some...
But they're not Singaporeans.
Well, also...
We only count the rich ones.
Look, the issue is that they've come from even worse conditions in many cases. People move to Singapore for an increase in lifestyle, right? you could take Ireland or Switzerland, right? Economically free places. Ireland was economically in a disaster.
Do you think the average Irish person lives well?
Well,
The
their
average
economy
50th
almost
percentile Irish person lives well.
their economy almost collapsed in 2011, and they went down the road of lower taxes, lower regulations, and they attracted all sorts of businesses into the economy.
And do you think that works well for the average Irishman who doesn't own a home in Dublin?
If you measure everything by home ownership,
I'm measuring people by the average. I want to know what the average man or woman in Dublin today lives like.
By the way, I'm also furious about the home ownership thing. Everyone is. I think it's utterly ridiculous the way, the idea that homes are now worth 10 times the average wage, all of that. The difference is I blame government for that. I blame high taxes because of high taxes, they can take out more debt. They can then inflate the economy.
So do you think if we shrink the government, if we start to slash government spending, do you think that would improve living conditions?
Well, the UK government is 45% of the economy. That's a huge government. It's
so do you think
biggest
US
World
living
War
conditions
II.
will increase in the next few years because we have a US government now that is planning to slash the US government?
Well, that's what the US voters have asked for.
Do you think it will improve living conditions?
Do I think it'll improve
for the average American?
If there's smaller government? I trust markets.
So you think the average US American will be richer in 3 years than they are now?
Here's what I trust. I trust economic freedom. If people have freedom, they create better decisions for their own life. There's two ways to make decisions, right? There's two ways.
Do you have freedom?
I got less freedom than I did when I arrived. Just
because my sister can't pay the rent. Is that freedom?
If you're living in a country...
She can't afford to live in the city that she was born in.
I agree. You and I agree on the problem. You keep bringing back to the problem.
I keep bringing it back to people because the people who watch... We're millionaires, okay? The people who watch us are mostly not millionaires. Is life going to get better for them?
Life will get better if you are connected to the most productive parts of the economy. If you pretend that it's 1955 and you recreate the post-war era conditions, if you try to go back to 1955, I don't think that's going to work.
So let me ask on that then, the point about if you're connected to the most productive parts of the economy. I was quite surprised when I was doing some research on this to find that there's quite big differences between the UK and the US in terms of GDP growth. In Q4 2024, the US economy grew by 0.6%, while the UK growth was 0.1%. So they're doing significantly better in that regard. US GDP per head stands at $82,000 per head, whereas the UK stands at $49,000 per head. And stock market performance, which is an indication of, I guess, whatever, rose by 300% in the US, whereas the FTSE 100 declined by 20%, which is the UK stock market. Productivity growth since 2018, productivity increased by 30% in the United States, which has outpaced the UK. And lastly, income growth. Since 2007, American income per head has increased by 72%, while it has decreased by 2% in the UK in dollar terms. So they seem to be doing better if you just look at the economy. Why is that? Is that because they lean more into technology and to innovation and entrepreneurship? And is it because of the things you were saying earlier about their attitude towards the government, like reduce government spending versus tax the rich? Why? I'm keen to hear Gary's view on this because I understand yours because you've just said it.
Yeah, I think these are great statistics. And of course, the US has a strong reputation for being very free markets and being very small states. In the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we've had a UK government that has been aggressively slashing the state. And the US...
state's bigger than ever. It's 45% of the economy.
And the US, we had a government in the last 4 years which has been running a massive, massive deficit. So in that period of time, it appears the government which has been aggressively increasing its deficit has massively overperformed the government which has been aggressively slashing the state. That's what it looks to be from the last... I mean, Joe Biden enormously increased the deficit, enormously. And the Conservatives were austerity government for 14 years. Which one seems to have given the better numbers?
Well, I mean, they were austerity in name only. They went from 30%, the state was 30% of GDP
so do you
to
think,
45% of
government
GDP.
services are better funded now?
The government is terrible at doing most things. That's the problem. You don't want
You don't
government...
think that spending on government services has been slashed?
Let me zoom out a little.
Do you think the police spending's been slashed?
Oh, police spending is
Do you
definitely
think education spending's been slashed?
Do you know where it ends up? It ends up with like big corporates, big consulting, who get paid $50 million to produce a report to tell government something, right? All of these big, I won't name names, but all the big consulting firms, they're all bloodsuckers to government. They know that the money's in the government, and they set up business models to extract that money from government. And it also is in the financial trading side of things. One of the issues that we've got, right, and this is a big issue as well, because you care about wealth inequality. One of the biggest issues I see is that during the pandemic, we all learned to work remotely, and remote work became the norm. And what I see at the moment is huge amounts of what would have been normal British jobs are going to the Philippines, going to India, going to Vietnam, people who work remotely now. We now have 1,000 millionaires a month leaving to go to Dubai. We have 120,000 British people living in Dubai in that economy. The world's become incredibly mobile. And one of the things that's happening is that what would have previously been good British jobs are getting moved overseas to lower cost countries. And that's technology that drives that wedge. The US is very smart in that they've built a technology powerhouse, and the UK has completely lost our technology industry. Our tech industry is in decline, same across Europe. China and the US know that the game is tech, and they're basically pulling all the tech company into their borders. And what's happening a lot is the erosion of good jobs and the erosion of just normal, well-paying jobs because they're going. And it's a bit of a self-fulfilling loop that the more we lose millionaires, the tax burden falls on everyone else, so they put the taxes up, and then the millionaires say, oh, the taxes are too high, so they leave. I've watched some of the most incredible entrepreneurs that you would want here that would employ your sister at a high rate, and they've picked up and left because the taxes are too high.
So are you saying we should tax working people less?
Well, the overall government has to be smaller.
Okay.
You can't. Whoever's
so what do you want to cut in the government?
If you, well, I mean, you'd have to.
Child services?
We'd have to. No.
Police?
No. Well,
education?
No,
NHS?
All I know is this.
Pensions?
You go to Switzerland, they spend
Welfare for single mothers?
25%.
Disabled benefits? What do you want to cut?
Hold up. All I know is in Switzerland.
I'll tell you what I want to do.
The government is 25%.
I want to cut the taxes on those entrepreneurs and raise the taxes on the billionaires.
Yeah.
Because I worked my tits off.
How many billionaires are in the UK?
There's a lot of billionaires in the UK.
It's 150.
Yeah, so tax them all. What do they pay?
Yeah.
Listen, I worked my tits off and I paid, it was 50% top rated tax. 50% top rated tax plus national insurance, 60%.
So $1 million a year.
To bring my family out of poverty. At the same time, the Duke of Westminster inherited £10 billion and paid nothing. Do you think that's fair?
That's not true.
Okay, why is it not true?
Because the Duke of Westminster is one of the highest taxpayers in the country.
What does he pay?
Well, on the trust, the Grosvenor estate, they don't pay inheritance tax because trusts can't die. They pay something called periodic taxes,
Which is how much?
6% every
How
10
often?
years.
6%, so they pay 0.6% a year.
Six-
So I paid
just hold up.
60% and this guy pays 0.6%.
Apples with apples. Inheritance tax is 40% across the course of your life. If a trust is, if a person lives who owns a trust for 70 years, then 6% times 7 would be 42. So they actually pay more.
So he pays
inheritance tax.
0.6% a year.
Pro
You're
rata.
telling me 0.6%
But that would
a
be
year.
the same as...
What percent did I pay per year?
No. But that's...
60%.
Hold up.
So you're saying I pay, what's 60 over 0.6?
No.
100 times the tax rate.
You're not
is what I
comparing
pay.
apples with apples.
Wait, why is it not apples with apples? This
Because
guy pays 0.6% a year. I paid
no.
60% a year.
That's inheritance tax.
I paid that 60%
You're
every
talking
year, Daniel.
income
Every
tax.
year I paid
You're
it.
paying income tax.
So why have I
The
paid?
Duke of Westminster
why do I
pays
pay
income
more
tax.
than him?
The Duke of Westminster pays income tax. He probably makes your bill blush.
Yeah, you think he pays income tax?
Yeah, well, if he's going to live, he has to withdraw money to have his income. He also, let me give you a list of
Okay.
all the taxes he would pay. He'd pay income tax, corporate tax. He'd pay stamp duty when he buys a building. He pays any of the other taxes, VAT when he spends money. All the same taxes apply to a duke as they apply to anybody else.
So you think he pays income tax on the income on that?
Any income he draws.
Okay, well our
would
viewers
pay
can
tax.
research whether he pays income tax on his income. Because I
Of
don't
course
think
he
he
pays.
does.
I mean, how could he
It's
not?
in a trust.
He's
It's in a trust.
But the only difference with a trust
Yeah.
versus income is that the trust pays periodic tax versus inheritance
At
tax.
0.6%.
But we're only talking inheritance. That's just
Okay.
one type of tax.
So you
Trust,
think he's paying 60% on his income?
he's one of the highest taxpayers in the UK. I'm not like his big fan club, but the truth is he's one of the highest taxpayers in the UK.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favour. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.